And the Securities and Exchange Commission appeared in federal court. It was sued because the SEC approved a NASDAQ diversity rule. The diversity rule requires companies listed on the NASDAQ to have a board member who identifies as a female and someone from a minority or LGBTQ group. And if the NASDAQ-listed company doesn't do this, they'll have to explain why. The think tank National Center for Public Policy Research and another group are trying to overturn the rule. Those groups argue that requiring companies to have board members based on gender and orientation is unconstitutional. SEC says the First and Fifth Amendments, though, don't apply to the NASDAQ because it is a private entity. And here to talk more in depth about the diversity rule and the lawsuit, we spoke to the think tank that has sued the SEC. Here's Entity's Don Ma with Scott Shepard from the National Center for Public Policy Research.
Scott, thanks for coming on today. Now, tell me something. The NASDAQ's board diversity rule, what's the issue? It requires the companies listed on the NASDAQ to have diverse members. What's the concern here?
Well, it requires them to have diverse members on the basis of race, sex, and orientation. And it turns out that in the United States, taking race, sex, and orientation into account in making hiring decisions is illegal and unconstitutional. And we all have civil rights, and we have the same civil rights. So it's illegal and unconstitutional, regardless of the groups that you're discriminating against in those categories, and regardless if you've labeled the groups that you're discriminating in favor of as diverse or not.
Now, the SEC says that the First and Fifth Amendment doesn't apply to NASDAQ because it's a private entity. Well, what do you say to that?
Well, there are two thoughts there. First, it's been clear since the 1960s, and the left really used to understand this, that civil rights laws apply to private entities as well as public entities. But additionally, the SEC itself is very much a public organization, and it has to approve or disapprove anything that the NASDAQ does in a regulatory way. And it approved this, and that approval was state action, government action, and that approval violated, for certain, the Fifth and First Amendments. But also, NASDAQ has been established as a government actor since the 1975 revisions of the Securities Exchange Act. So, that's nearly 50 years now. Everybody is perfectly aware that this is government action, and for the SEC to pretend otherwise is pretty much par for the course for Gary Gensler's SEC.
Now, let me ask you this. Isn't it beneficial for investors to know the diversity among the board members for the company they're investing in?
Well, most companies are happy to provide all sorts of information about their boards of directors and do so in their proxy statements and otherwise. If companies don't elect to ask for private information like this and protected information like this from board members, then that's certainly their consideration. And if board members don't care to give it, it's certainly their consideration as well. Not a question for the NASDAQ, whose only responsibility is to make its index, make its market regular, not to inflict it with left-wing quotas or anything else. And that's what's happening here.
Now you mentioned quota. Isn't the rule sort of a disclosure framework rather than a diversity quota?
Well, it gives companies two bad and unconstitutional choices. Follow the quota side of the rule, or they disclose why they haven't. And of course, a complete answer to that question ought to be, well, we followed the law and didn't illegally and unconstitutionally consider race, sex, or orientation in our hiring decisions. But in answering that way, they will have put a target on their back for all of the woke protesters. And it's a First Amendment precedent that you don't have to hang a target on your own back for other people to come and harass you. And that's exactly what NASDAQ and the SEC are doing.
But do you think diversity is important? There's a lot of talk about it. Do you think it's important?
Well, certainly what's been established by all sorts of studies is the most important kind of diversity in boardrooms and throughout companies is viewpoint diversity. That would actually be somewhat related to the market. We don't think that the NASDAQ should be regulating that either. But we think diversity of all kinds is fine, but mandating diversity and having quotas for diversity and discriminating against anybody on the basis of race, sex, and orientation is wrong. And the benefits that arise from diversity can't outweigh the benefits that arise from merit and hard work and from obeying the law and not reintroducing systemic racism throughout American business.
All right, thanks for coming on today. Scott Shepard, Free Enterprise Project Director at National Center for Public Policy Research. Pleasure talking to you.
Thank you so much.